Welcome to Books and Bites, your shortcut to big ideas, so stay with us, listen, and level up just from hearing. Today, we're diving deep into a classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Ah, a book that's almost a century old and still so relevant.
Right. It's like, a book has to have some serious staying power to be topping the bestseller list after all these years.
It really does.
So it's not just about making friends.
No.
This book is a guide to, understanding, human nature.
It is.
And building those meaningful relationships in really every aspect of life.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right, so How to Win Friends and Influence People breaks down into 4 sections, each one tackling specific techniques for, as the title suggests, winning friends and influencing people. So we've got handling people, making people like you, winning them to your way of thinking, and then finally becoming a leader.
It really dives right into some core principles for handling people. And it all starts with a concept that might seem a little counterintuitive. Don't criticize.
Okay, so I think a lot of times our instinct is to kind of point out what's wrong.
Yeah.
But Carnegie, he actually uses the example of Abraham Lincoln, who learned the hard way that, constantly criticizing others, it just alienates them.
Right.
So if even Honest Abe had to learn this lesson, there's got to be something to it.
There definitely is. So instead of criticizing Carnegie, he encourages us to try to understand people's perspectives. Why do they act the way they do? What are their motivations? And just kind of making that shift in thinking can make a huge difference in how we approach those relationships.
So it's like taking a step back and trying to see the world through their eyes instead of just judging their actions.
Exactly. And building on that, Carnegie, he really stresses the power of sincere appreciation. He argues that people, they crave genuine appreciation more than almost anything else, but it has to be authentic, not just empty flattery.
Right.
So how do we show that genuine appreciation without it sounding fake?
Yeah. So Carnegie, he gives this example of Charles Schwab. He was a steel magnate, known for his incredible success in motivating people.
Right.
One of his secrets. He made it a point to specifically praise his employees for their accomplishments. He'd notice small details, comment on them, making people feel seen, valued.
So it's not just saying good job, it's about those specific and acknowledging the effort that someone put in.
Exactly. And it ties back to understanding perspectives. If you truly understand what someone's trying to achieve, you can genuinely appreciate their effort.
It's about making them feel like they matter.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I can definitely see how that applies, not just in the workplace, but also in our personal relationships as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whether you're dealing with colleagues, family, or friends, just showing genuine appreciation can really strengthen those bonds.
Okay, so we've talked about avoiding criticism and showing genuine appreciation.
Yes.
What else does Carnegie kind of have up his sleeve when it comes to handling people?
Well, this one is key. Frame things in terms of the other person's wants. It's about understanding what motivates them, appealing to their desires.
Okay. So instead of just focusing on what we want,
Right.
we need to consider what's in it for them.
Exactly. Think about it. Have you ever been more receptive to an idea when you saw how it could help you achieve your own goals?
For sure.
Right. We're all more likely to kind of get on board when we see that personal benefit.
Oh, absolutely. It's about creating that win-win situation.
Yes.
Where everyone feels like they're getting something out of the interaction.
Precisely. It's about collaboration, not just getting your own way.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So we've covered those basics of handling people.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to, I think, the fun part, making people like you. Carnegie outlines 6 ways to achieve this. And honestly, some of them are surprisingly simple.
They are simple, but they're powerful. And he starts off with, the importance of being genuinely interested in others. It sounds pretty obvious, but, think about how often we're preoccupied with, ourselves and our own thoughts. Carnegie, he emphasizes the need to truly listen and engage with others, to show that genuine curiosity about their lives and interests.
So it's not just about waiting for your turn to speak.
No.
It's about actively listening and asking those thoughtful questions.
Right. And Carnegie actually points to Theodore Roosevelt. He was apparently a master at this.
Okay.
He had this uncanny ability to remember details about people's lives and interests.
Wow.
Making them feel like they were the most important person in the room.
I can barely remember what I ate for breakfast, let alone all the details of everyone I meet.
Well, maybe we don't all have to be Roosevelt.
Right.
But we can certainly strive to be more attentive and present in our interactions.
That's a good point. Small steps.
Yes.
Now, I got to hear more about these 6 ways to make people like you.
Okay.
What else did Carnegie suggest?
Well, he talks about the power of a simple smile.
Okay.
Think about it, a genuine smile. It's contagious and disarming. It instantly puts people at ease, makes them feel more comfortable around you.
It's like a universal sign of friendliness.
It is.
And it costs nothing.
Exactly. And speaking of, small things that make a big impact, Carnegie stresses the importance of remembering and using people's names. It might seem insignificant, but just hearing your name spoken, it makes you feel acknowledged, valued.
It does. He even tells a story about a politician who was a master at this.
Right.
This guy would repeat people's names throughout conversation, and it made them feel, incredibly important.
Absolutely. It's a simple technique, but it just shows you're paying attention.
Yeah.
That you care enough to remember their name. It's like a mental sticky note that says, you matter to me.
I like that. Okay, so we've got being genuinely interested, smiling, remembering name. What are the other 3 ways to make people like you?
Well, 2 of them go hand in hand. Being a good listener and encouraging others to talk about themselves. Let's face it. Most people, they love to talk about themselves, their experiences, their thoughts. By being a good listener, you're giving them a gift, the opportunity to share their story and feel heard.
And Carnegie argues that the best conversationalists are the ones who ask those engaging questions, and then they truly listen to the answers.
Absolutely. It's about making the other person feel like they're the most interesting person in the world.
Which leads us to the final point.
Yes.
Talking in terms of the other person's interests.
Yeah.
So it's not about, dominating the conversation with your own passions.
Right.
It's about finding that common ground.
Exactly.
Engaging with what excites them.
Imagine you're talking to someone who's passionate about, say, collecting vintage vinyl records. Instead of, steering the conversation towards your love of underwater basket weaving, wouldn't it be more effective to ask them about their record collection? Their favorite artists, the thrill of the hunt?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It shows that you're making an effort to connect with them on their level.
Yes.
To understand what makes them tick. And honestly, it probably makes for a much more interesting conversation, too.
It does. It does. And it shows that you value their passions. So far, we've covered those first 2 sections of the book, handling people and making them like you. Now let's dive into kind of like the art of persuasion. Winning people to your way of thinking. Carnegie kicks this section off with another seemingly counterintuitive point. The best way to win an argument is to avoid it altogether.
That's interesting. So I think a lot of times we think of arguments as a way to, prove our point, maybe convince others. But is Carnegie suggesting that we should just give in and agree with everyone?
Not necessarily. What he argues is that most arguments, they just create resentment and make the other person defensive,
Right.
They dig their heels in deeper instead of opening their mind to your perspective.
Okay. Yeah. I can see how that would backfire. So if we're not supposed to argue, how do we get people to see our side of things?
By focusing on understanding, respect, and collaboration. Carnegie actually uses the example of Benjamin Franklin, who was known for his ability to win people over without ever engaging in, heated arguments.
Okay.
Franklin, he believed in listening carefully to the other person's viewpoint and finding that common ground.
It's like that saying, seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Yes.
So by showing that we respect that other person's opinion, we create an environment where they're more likely to listen to ours.
Exactly. And a big part of that is avoiding those trigger phrases, those phrases that instantly put people on the defensive.
Yeah.
Instead of saying you're wrong, try acknowledging their perspective and gently guiding them towards a different viewpoint.
So instead of saying you're completely off base, I might say something like, I understand where you're coming from, but have you considered this angle?
Perfect. And Carnegie even suggests using a disarming phrase like, I may be wrong, but
Okay.
it just shows humility and openness, making you more approachable.
Takes the sting out of the disagreement. So we're not trying to win the argument. We're trying to win over the person.
Exactly. Now, this next point might seem even more counterintuitive.
Okay.
But Carnegie, he says admitting your own mistakes quickly and emphatically can actually make you more persuasive.
Really? Why would admitting that I'm wrong make someone more likely to agree with me?
Because it builds trust and shows humility. People, they appreciate honesty and they're more likely to forgive us, when we own up to our mistakes.
Right.
It makes us relatable.
It's like saying, hey, I'm not perfect, but I'm willing to learn and grow.
Right. And that kind of vulnerability can be very disarming. Now, remember how we talked about framing things in terms of the other person's wants?
Well, that ties into another key principle. letting the other person feel like the idea is theirs.
So it's not about dictating.
Right.
It's about, I guess, subtly guiding them to a conclusion
Yes.
that they feel they reached on their own.
Exactly. It's like planting a seed and letting it grow organically. By asking questions, guiding the conversation, you can lead someone to your viewpoint while making them feel like they own the idea.
That's pretty clever. It takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
And makes it feel like a collaboration rather than a battle of wills.
Right. And this next point is all about fostering that sense of collaboration. Let the other person do most of the talking.
Well, that's easy enough for me. I love to hear myself talk. But seriously, why is that so effective?
Because, as we mentioned before, people, they love to talk about themselves. It makes them feel important, heard.
Right.
And by listening carefully, you gain valuable insights into their thoughts, motivations.
It's like gathering intel before you make your move. You learn what makes them tick, what their priorities are, their pain points. And by understanding their perspective, you can tailor your message to resonate with them on a deeper level.
It's about finding that common ground, that shared understanding.
Yes.
And once you have that, it's much easier to move towards a mutually beneficial outcome.
Now, speaking of seeing things from the other person's perspective, Carnegie, he emphasizes the importance of trying to understand their point of view, even if you disagree with it. He uses Henry Ford as an example. He argues that Ford's success was due in part to his ability to empathize with his workers, understand their needs.
So it's not just about listening to their words.
Right.
It's about understanding the emotions and motivations behind those words.
Exactly. It's about stepping outside of our own limited perspective and trying to see the world through their eyes. And when we do that, we build stronger connections and find solutions that work for everyone involved.
It's like that saying, walk a mile in their shoes. You can't truly understand someone until you've seen the world from their perspective.
And that leads us to another key principle. Being sympathetic to the other person's ideas and desires. It's about acknowledging their emotions, validating their feelings, making them feel heard and understood.
I'm sensing a theme here. It's all about making the other person feel valued and respected.
Yes.
And that simple phrase Carnegie highlights, I understand how you feel, can be so powerful in achieving that.
It is. It shows you're not dismissing their feelings, but trying to connect with them on an emotional level. Now, the final point in this section is about appealing to nobler motives. Carnegie, he argues that people are more likely to respond to appeals that align with their values and aspirations.
So instead of just focusing on, the practical benefits, we should also tap into their desire to do good, to be part of something meaningful.
Exactly. He uses the example of charities, which are often successful because they appeal to people's generosity and their desire to make a positive impact on the world.
It's about reminding people of, their better selves, their desire to contribute to something bigger than themselves.
Right. And that brings us to the final section of the book, Be a Leader. How to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. This section, it's all about applying these principles to leadership. And it starts with a familiar theme. Begin with praise and honest appreciation.
It's like that sandwich approach to feedback, right?
Yeah.
Start with something positive, then address the areas that need improvement, and then end on another positive note.
Exactly. And Carnegie, he says this is especially effective when dealing with employees. Employers who praise their employees before pointing out mistakes often get better results than those who just focus on the negative.
Yeah, it's about creating that positive and supportive environment.
Yes.
Where people feel encouraged to, grow and improve. Mm-hmm. And kind of related to that is the idea of calling attention to mistakes indirectly.
Yes, offering suggestions for improvement rather than outright criticism. Like instead of saying you did this wrong, you might say, hey, this could be even better if.
Right. It's a subtle but important distinction. So it's about framing that feedback in a way that, feels constructive, not accusatory.
Exactly. And if you need to address a mistake, Carnegie, he recommends talking about your own mistakes before criticizing others.
Okay.
It shows humility, makes you more relatable.
It's like saying, hey, I make mistakes too, but here's what I learned from it.
Right.
That makes people much more receptive to feedback because it doesn't feel like they're being singled out or attacked.
Exactly. It levels the playing field. And along those lines, Carnegie suggests asking questions instead of giving direct orders.
Right, because it fosters collaboration rather than resistance. It makes people feel like they're part of that decision-making process.
Yeah.
Rather than just being told what to do.
Exactly. So instead of saying, do this, try asking, do you think this would work? Or what are your thoughts on this approach?
It empowers people.
Yes.
Encourages them to take ownership of their work. Now, what about when someone really messes up? How do we address that with, crushing their spirit?
Well, Carnegie, he stresses the importance of letting the other person save face.
Okay.
It's about avoiding public humiliation and giving people that opportunity to correct their mistakes with dignity.
Right.
Everyone makes mistakes, and it's how we handle those mistakes that matters most.
Absolutely. So it's about preserving their self-respect.
Yes.
While still addressing the issue. And that ties into another one of Carnegie's principles, praising every improvement, no matter how small.
Positive reinforcement is so important.
It is.
By acknowledging and celebrating those small wins, we encourage continuous improvement.
Yeah.
It creates that positive feedback loop.
Right.
Keeps people motivated.
And that leads to another interesting concept, giving the other person a fine reputation to live up to.
Yes.
So it's about expressing confidence in their potential, believing in their ability to succeed.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we believe in someone, they're more likely to believe in themselves and strive to meet those expectations.
It's about setting a high bar and then giving them the support.
Yes.
And the encouragement that they need to reach it. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this book for me is that it's not about manipulating people. It's about understanding them.
Yes.
Respecting them.
Yes.
Connecting with them on a deeper level.
Absolutely. It's about building genuine relationships that benefit everyone involved.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I wanted to ask you, what were your top 1 or 2 takeaways from how to win friends and influence people?
Well, for me, I think the most powerful concept was the idea of avoiding arguments.
Okay.
It's so easy to get caught up in trying to prove ourselves right.
Right.
But it rarely leads to anything positive. Instead, seeking common ground, understanding the other person's perspective, that's much more effective. What about you? What stood out to you?
Honestly, the power of sincere appreciation, that really struck a chord with me. It's such a simple concept, yet we often forget to express gratitude, acknowledge the contributions of others. And I think we could all benefit from, making that conscious effort to appreciate the people in our lives.
It's like that quote from Maya Angelou, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
That's so true. And I think Carnegie taps into that beautifully in this book. He reminds us that at the end of the day, it's about human connection. It's about treating people with kindness, respect, and empathy.
And those values, they're always in style. So to wrap up, if you're looking to, level up your social skills, build stronger relationships, and become a more influential leader, How to Win Friends and Influence People is a must-read. It's a timeless guide to navigating, the complexities of human interaction.
Couldn't agree more. It's a book that can truly change your life.
And hey, even if you just implement, a few of Carnegie's principles, you'll be amazed at the positive impact it can have on your interactions.
Yeah.
It's all about taking those small steps that lead to big changes.
Small changes, big impact.
Yes.
That's a great takeaway.
Right.
So for our listeners who are eager to learn more, we've included a link to the book in the episode description.
Definitely check it out. You won't regret it. It's an investment in yourself and your relationships.
And subscribe to Books and Bites for more insightful summaries.